Oh my god, why would you play Tower of Fantasy? You know that it's a cheap $2 knockoff of Genshin Impact, right? Excuse me? What? No. Tower of Fantasy is the most original, the most incredible gacha game literally of all time. What are you even talking about? That's, well, the entire Genshin Tower Fantasy gacha MMO community right now, which is where this article right here comes in. Tower of Fantasy is a copy paste of Genshin Impact, or isn't it? We uncovered the similarities between Tower of Fantasy and Genshin Impact and answer if Hada Studios' new MMO is a blatant copy or not. This right here is going to be definitive proof, the deciding factor that will end all discussions, all arguments since the dawn of Tower Fantasy's announcement. This right here will tell us whether Tower Fantasy is a blatant copy of Genshin Impact or not. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery that mediocrity can pay to greatness. This Oscar Wilde quote perfectly conveys my feelings about Hada Studios' newest addictive MMO, Tower Fantasy. However, despite the game's near instant virality, some critics claim it's but another Genshin Impact lookalike. In this article, I'll highlight Tower Fantasy's similarities and the unique aspects that make it worthwhile to play. I'll do my best not to dissuade anyone from relishing the newly debuted MMO, but rather guide gamers' expectations regarding everything the game entails. Why Tower Fantasy's critiques are not warranted. The most common sentiment regarding Tower Fantasy is that it is a Genshin Impact clone, and that is very true. While this claim is not entirely untrue, there's more to this MMO than meets the eye. Following Genshin Impact's release, early reviews slammed it as a distant inspiration or blatant copy of The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Do you guys remember that time the dude threw his Switch on the ground and he decried the entire franchise? That was, man, those were good times back then. People were less critical. No, actually, you know what? People were more critical of clones back then. Man, now it seems that critics have similar things to say about Tower Fantasy. And you know what? The Tower Fantasy is admittedly not the first that they have to say this about. Every gacha game that comes out that looks remotely close to being an open world anime RPG that has similar aesthetics, people immediately slap on that Genshin clone label. Let's see. Not claiming it takes more than just inspiration from Genshin, but is it a blatant clone or is it instead heavily influenced by Genshin's success? A lot of games have admittedly been heavily influenced by its success, and you can see this by just looking at all of the upcoming gacha games slated for release in 2023 and 2024, like Wuthering Waves, like Arknight's Enfield, the success of other games like, man, what was that kind of like Roman themed game? Immortals Phoenix Rising, there we go. It took a brush off of the shoulder for Genshin Impact to move past harsh critiques, and assumably the same will happen with Tower Fantasy, although admittedly the Tower Fantasy hype has died down quite significantly over the first week of it launching, and I'm gonna assume here that that's mostly due to the fact that the people that had anticipated being something closely resembling Genshin learned that it was not, and that it was actually quite different. Similarities between Tower Fantasy and Genshin Impact. Perhaps one of the most striking similarities between Genshin Impact and Tower Fantasy is the storyline. Admittedly, some dialogues and missions were dissimilar, but its narrative felt a little too on the nose in Teyvat. And I'm just gonna stop right there because just playing through the first hour of both games, other than the very, very beginning where you see the two different siblings engaging a larger boss, in the case of Genshin, it's some super hot celestial waifu, and in the case of Tower Fantasy, it's just a big dog. Immediately after that, The game shares almost no similarities in terms of story. Unlike Genshin Impact, Tower Fantasy is set in a dystopian futuristic world where I played as a wanderer. This is oddly synonymous with Genshin Impact's Traveler, and that is true. But I mean, this is a Chinese game, it makes sense. Nevertheless, this wanderer has a sibling, but they lose contact during pre-game cinematic travels. In comparison, both the Traveler and the Wanderer face some form of amnesia. As the plot unfolds, the Wanderer falls unconscious after being chased by dogs, some with several heads, plagued by the virus Omnium, which transforms animals and humans into beasts. From there, the Wanderer awakens, dazed and in a settlement, trying to grasp their bearings. I won't spoil too much, but generally the journey starts similar. Like, it doesn't really. I get that, you know, it starts off with you and your brother or sister getting attacked by something, and you're kind of alone after that, and then you kind of want to find your sibling, but like, you're taking one minute aspect of the story and comparing them together, linking them together. That's not how you do things. By that logic, literally every JRPG starts out the same way. Main character, childhood friend, cute childhood friend that loves main character. Something terrible happens in the town, their parents die or their families die, boom, you're on a journey to save the world. Interestingly, Tower Fantasy's customization mechanic features an impactful difference between both games that alter the flow of the story. Wait, what? Being able to customize your character's appearance alters the flow of the story? Like, what? Like, if you have Big Booba, their enemies are gonna be distracted? Or they might be more open to negotiation because you're super hot as opposed to a guy? Specifically, I could model my Wanderer to my liking. I could model my Wanderer to my liking. This altered the flow of the story. How? Compared to Genshin Impact's usually black and white protagonist, this customization immersed me more into its narrative because it involved something that I created. So basically, no, so it didn't alter the flow of the story, you just liked it more because you created the character. More verticality, same combat. No, have you played this game? Genshin and Tower Fantasy's combat is contrastingly different. They are so distant from one another. Tower Fantasy's gameplay mechanics are similar to Genshin Impact. This might be an understatement. Both games have the standard hack and slash combat and abilities, and the fighting is also fairly rapid and dynamic. One comparison Genshin Impact travelers would instantly notice is Tower Fantasy features lootable chests, monsters, and interactive environmental areas. Reaching these places or beasts requires traversing hills, rivers, mountains, and like Genshin Impact, climbing vertically. Yeah, in Genshin Impact, you know, you very clearly could not traverse hills, you couldn't traverse rivers, you couldn't traverse mountains. Yeah, this is very different to Genshin Impact. Fortunately, adventuring is made easier with jetpacks and flashy motorbikes, which I do like. I think having the option of propelling yourself upwards with your jetpack, using your little hoverboard to surf around the ocean, having a motorbike makes traveling from point A to B so much faster, which allowed me to zoom and fly across the world of Asperia. That's what it's called, Asperia. Wow, I had no idea. Notably, combat generally feels much more invigorating, especially considering I was able to utilize two with the third unlockable later weapons, their unique combos, abilities, and dash animations. Wait. So the reason combat feels more invigorating is because they could utilize two with a third, three weapons that have their own unique combat styles, abilities, and dash animation. Have I been playing the wrong Genshin Impact? Do you not in Genshin Impact have 4 playable characters that each have generally their own weapons with their own unique combos, their own unique abilities? And okay, you know what? I'll give them this. Genshin does reuse a lot of animations. But am I just playing a different game, or does this person not actually play one or both of them? Like Genshin Impact, Tower Fantasy's fighting system is presented differently, but follows the same formula of hitting and charging up special moves to blast away enemies. Dude, have you never played an action game? Literally, every action game has you charge up abilities and use special moves. A notable feature in Tower Fantasy is the game's generosity. Of course, it's not absurdly giving away tons of resources. Still, if I played long enough, I don't think I'd have any trouble saving up for my favorite banner, similar to how travelers stack their primo gems for 2 months and lose pity to Chi-Chi. If Genshin Impact's microtransactions take the form of exclusive characters, Tower Fantasy molds its gacha rolling system through simulacrum and matrices. This pity system also allows wanderers to hit the rarest item on the banner at 80 pulls, with the first 30 pulls on an account guaranteeing an item. Like Genshin Impact, the amount of pulls doesn't reset, meaning wanderers can continue reserving their pity for an approaching banner. And you know what? I will admit, Tower Fantasy does have a much fairer gacha system than Genshin Impact, but I don't know how that affects pay to win, since they're directly discussing pay to win, but not actually discussing pay to win. This is a very, Jay Hunter, I'm sorry, I'm not hating on you here, but this article so far has been absolutely all over the place. Is Tower Fantasy a Genshin Impact copy? I wouldn't say it is an exact copy, his words, but I can see why many critics would think so. On the one hand, it looks like Genshin Impact, therefore it must be. That's literally all I've gotten from this article. On the one hand, saying Genshin Impact inspires it would be equally scandalous, especially considering the game's many carbon-copied gameplay mechanics. Yes, carbon-copied, Genshin Impact copied gameplay mechanics, as opposed to carbon-copied gameplay mechanics from the larger gaming genre overall. But this doesn't make it a terrible game. Instead, copying aspects of Genshin would make this as bad a game as Genshin was made a bad game by copying aspects of Breath of the Wild. Instead, it seems like it is built with a legacy blueprint with the potential to expand its originality as it progresses. Moreover, it's beautiful and quite refreshing, similar to how critics branded Genshin Impact as a copy of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Tower Fantasy seems to be facing the same dilemma, but Genshin's community is so much larger and so much more toxic. Of course, I can't deny both games didn't feature some similarities to previous other titles. Still, most agree that Tower Fantasy will evolve to become even more unique, as every game does. The only question is, what would its evolution look like in the future? I hope it's nothing short of marvelous. And this right here is admittedly what happens when you have someone write an article about 2 games they have not played more than 30 minutes of. That is very evident by how little this guy knew about either game.